I break up room, no seed biting, never bites. Fast water dribbling in the girls down in the guys. Spin now see blank, you right by. OMG, Mac 4, Robin C, yelling that night. Hot stove talk, Robin C, bringing the high. EC's alive, plus toss some of those in my city lights. White. Queens got the dreams united. On the rag, try bring me stack. Night and under that chocolate flag. Smack that hole out the park. Fuck a deafening black. Side game time, Robin CP time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remains cheer in the orange, we unite. Mets forever. I'm fit to be in sight. Mets riding high. Energy like a live wire. Queen City chance. Passion never tires. Grand slam dreams and paces on the fast. Holding it steady cause we know we gonna last. We the kings of the field, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remain cheer, in the orange we unite. Mets forever, our victory in sight. All hearts ignite like NYC stars. Robin CP, guiding even through scars. Queens got the glow, city anthem flows.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to episode 22 of the Mets Hot Stove, and Happy New Year to everybody that we haven't spoke to together since the new year, and it is a new year, and well, not really no news, because that's what happens on this baseball hot stove, but we are going to bring everything we possibly can when it comes to the news that we're got to be talking about to fill out the rest of the roster. We got about, 40 days until pitchers and catchers and 83 days until the season opener in Houston, and we're ready to go, guys. So let's get it done. Let's start. Let's hopefully the Mets fill out the roster the way we want them to. Chris, Happy New Year, buddy.
Happy New Year to you and the chat. Salute to everybody here tonight. Is it Friday? Because these days are going by pretty fast for me, as well as in this off season for the New York Mets to start making some damn moves, like you said. Happy New Year to all. Thank you all for the support and being here with myself and Rob. We definitely appreciate it. I know everyone enjoys talking about our New York Mets, and we're getting a little bit antsy. Believe me, Rob and myself are as well, especially when you see the Dodgers signing anybody and everybody in this offseason. But you know what? Patience is a virtue, as they say. So let's have a good show. And we got a lot planned for you all, as you can see here with tonight's topic. So let's get into it.
Yeah, and, as you can see, the topics are about very similar players that we have been talking about over and over again. But it is the new year, and that means it's all about Roki Sasaki at this point in about, I would say, about 10 days or so, 10 days, when he can officially, he can sign now, but no team's going to do that until their international signing bonus kind of resets, and they can have all that extra money that they can use to sign Sasaki. So he ain't going to sign until at least January 15th, and that gives him like a 7-day, 8-day window where he can sign with any team that he seems fit. And again, I don't think anybody believes that the Mets are the favorites. I don't think, I think we're all delusional. Or, even though we kind of have, we have that somewhat of a gut feeling, maybe, just maybe he chooses the Mets, right? His agent came out of nowhere talking about Jeremy Hefner very early on in the winter meetings, and everybody's like, oh, wow, where did that come from? Out of nowhere, Jeremy Hefner's name has popped up from Sasaki's agent. And we do know that Sasaki isn't looking just about location. He's been talking about the how teams develop their players, especially their pitching. So it is really interesting to think that, if he does go elsewhere other than the West Coast, you would think that the teams that he interviewed with, because we don't know all the teams he interviewed with. We know he had a handful of teams that he interviewed with that we know of. And obviously the known ones, the Yankees, the Mets, the Giants, the Dodgers, I think it was the Red Sox and maybe the Padres, but they weren't listed on that teams that he met with. So I really don't know what the whole process is coming up. There was a report the other day, I forgot who wrote it, breaking it down a little bit more, where he's not necessarily going to have another meeting with new teams that might be involved. It's more about narrowing down the teams, Chris, of teams, and then he'll make his decision, and we'll have a better understanding. Maybe, top 3 teams are left, and maybe we'll have a final meeting. And we all know about the international signing bonus money. It's not that much of a difference money-wise from team to team, especially the teams that are involved. I think it's between 500,000 and about $1.1 million between certain teams, and that's if the teams that he picks as a finalist, it can even be narrowed even more when it comes to the money. So the money isn't a huge key for this decision for Sasaki, because it ain't, every man for himself, best offer wins. It's more about where he actually wants to be. And I want to get your thoughts on that when the Sasaki situation is coming to an end, hopefully soon.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Again, I think it's definitely situational fit, like you're saying, over the actual IFA money, because most of the offers are going to be right around there in the competitive ballpark with each other. But it's about situational fit. And it was actually interesting to hear Ken Rosenthal go on the Foul Territory podcast. I believe it was earlier today, if I'm not mistaken, and list his top 5 teams that are front runners on the, in the Sasaki sweepstakes. And he mentioned the Dodgers first. He mentioned the Mets. He mentioned the Yankees, the Padres, and the Rangers. The Rangers were his 5th team. And I'm starting to get this feeling that it's either he wants to be the guy or he doesn't want to be the guy, right? Yeah. If he wants to be the guy, the New York Mets are the team to go to, right? You have a rotation that's going to be pretty much headlined by him if he were to join this squad, then Kodai Senga, Sean Manaea, Peterson, Montas, etc. Clay Holmes is going to be in there as well. And however you round out that rotation. But does he want to be that guy, Rob? That's what we have to assess, because let's not forget that, the situation that he puts himself into, if he is expected to be that guy right away, I'm not saying he can or can't be, right? I'm not saying he can't be, because he's talented. He's got all the skill set and the tools with the pitches, the arsenal, the command, etc. But he's going to be pitching in hopes of impressing for his next contract, for the contract. This is not Yamamoto, who's breaking the record for amount of money given to a pitcher with $325 million. This is not that situation where he's getting a big payday up front. We're talking about a 22, 23-year-old guy right now that wants to go to a situation where he can develop and hone in on his craft in hopes of getting that Yamamoto type payday, if not more than Yamamoto. So does being the guy fit into that strategy and that narrative for him? I don't know. There's a case to be had of him going to a star-studded Dodgers team and learning and soaking in all that information from all those guys and not having the limelight on him, but quietly producing and then getting into the market or getting on the market when his contract is set to be renewed and just getting a payday, and maybe then going to a team where he could be that guy. So that's the sort of difference that I'm sort of wondering if that's the route that they're going to take, himself and his agent Joel Wolf. It remains to be seen. I hope he wants to be that guy as soon as he enters into this league, but without that guaranteed money, without that guaranteed payday, that's a big risk for him to take on.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? We don't know what he wants. And, if he wants, a low pressurized situation where he is the guy, it can be the Pittsburgh Pirates. It can be the Cincinnati Reds, teams like that. Shoot, the Chicago White Sox. But again, we don't know if he had meetings with those teams or has anything set up with those teams. And if that's not the case, if you look at all the teams, besides the Padres and I guess the Rangers, everybody else on that list is a big market team. So you're not really, putting yourself in a low pressurized situation if you're the Yankees, who have World Series aspirations. The Mets are trying to be big time contenders after the year they had last year. The Rangers 2 years ago were World Series champs. There's a lot of things you have to look at that when it comes to what he actually wants. Again, we just don't know, and that's why it's a little frustrating for fans, because we're trying to figure out what he really wants. And it is interesting that Rosenthal brought up the Dodgers, and then he brought up the Mets second. I wonder if that was strategic by him, where it was like that's what he feels like the favorites are right now in that order. or he just said it the way he said it. Maybe he had notes and that's how he wrote it. But we didn't even know the Rangers had a meeting with Sasaki. So, and that's the other thing. We don't know the other teams that he had meetings with. The ones that, were reported, we know of, but he could have met with, because I think Joel said 20 teams sent requests to Sasaki, but that doesn't mean he met with all 20. So again, that's, more than half the league. So you would think more teams are involved that we don't even know of, and you hope the narrowing down of teams come quickly, right? When January 15th comes, narrow the freaking teams down. If you want to take a week to talk to teams even more, which again, I don't know what else is there to talk about when there's not really offers that you really have to go crazy with, because it's the money that's available in the international pool money for either team that's involved. So it's not what's there to negotiate. I mean, maybe there's other things in the contract you can negotiate, like, a translator that he wants, or, crap like that. But nothing like baseball specific that can really, change your thoughts on what team to go to. And that's the thing, is like, I honestly think he knows where he's going already, to be quite honest with you. I think he knows. Obviously, he's not going to sign until January 15th because he gets just a tad bit more money from whatever team that might have, a little bit more pool money available. And that's the reason why he's waiting, because he could sign today if he wanted to, but that doesn't benefit him in the pockets a little bit more, maybe a couple $100,000 more per year, if that's the case. So I think he knows where he wants to go. And I just feel like January 16th is probably going to be the day. I don't think it's going to be too long, Chris. I just feel like he knows where he's going to go, because he did have those 2-hour meetings with all the teams. I mean, there isn't really much to talk about except, this is what we have available. If you want this contract, become a New York Met or become a Dodger or a Yankee or whatever. So I don't see, I think he knows by now, to be quite honest.
And if that's the case, then I'm just going to go ahead and just say he's going to the Dodgers at this point. Like, if he has his mind set up right now, and if he has his mind made up, he's going to the Dodgers. What was interesting for me to hear as a part of the, this process with teams meeting with him is that, he requested, I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he requested for there not to be any other players present to make their pitch alongside the actual representation that was being sent, whether it was, manager, GM, or whoever of these teams. But there was a lot of teams doing like videos of players that are currently on the team and kind of, playing it during the meeting, whatever. But it's just like, I don't know, maybe Kodai Senga filmed a little 2-minute video and making his pitch. But in any case, I thought that was interesting. I wouldn't be shocked, right? It's kind of these teams that are not named the Los Angeles Dodgers that have the hardest time here, because the Dodgers have, they can put a presentation up of their potential hypothetical rotation, a star-studded rotation, and be like, listen, you are not going to have that pressure. This is Los Angeles and there's pressure in that regard, but we are going to give you the most time and the most protection around you in order to develop your skill set and hone in on your craft. And the Mets, quite simply, from the way that I'm estimating this, is that their pitch to him is more of, we can't give you that time. We are confident in your abilities. You're going to have to perform for us on day one. And you know what? That could be either a turn on for Sasaki to be like, dude, I want to be that guy in a big market, get some endorsement deals, even though I'm not getting that solidified payday, and just be that guy right away. Or maybe he's just turned off by that. And it's just like, listen, that's too much right now. I want to go to the West Coast. I want to have guys around me that I can learn from and develop. And you know what? I wouldn't blame him. I would not blame him if he chooses that route, to be honest with you. I wouldn't. Because again, for me, if I was in those shoes, these players they want to win, right? And they want to have a legacy, but they want to get their money too at the end of the day. And you are jeopardizing money if you are going to go into a situation where you have to be that guy right away, unless he is completely sold on himself and the ease of that transition, because there is some difficulties in just the overall environment. Obviously, being in a new league against a different skill set of players in that are stepping into that batter's box. But I don't know, man. I think that if he is looking forward to that payday, it's going to be a hard sell for the New York Mets to actually land Sasaki, given how young he is and given that this is just IFA money at the end of the day. The Dodgers are clearly the favorites here. I mean, they're clearly the favorites.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Not a question.
Yeah, we can't change our geography. We can't change our location on the map. The Dodgers can have a 2-minute video showing, look, we have an 8-hour flight to Japan, so they can do that. And I'm sorry if my cat decides to jump on the background over here because he's ready to go. He's in a mood today, but sorry about that. But yeah, I just feel like the only way he's going to choose the Mets or anybody on the East Coast for that matter, because I think the Rangers are kind of like obviously in the middle basically of the country. So maybe that's a little bit of a little eye-opening for him, be like, Texas, not so bad. It's not crazy pressure. They already won a World Series. It's not as far as the East Coast. What do you want? I'm sorry. He's just all over today. But yeah, that's what I don't know. Like, I just hope he makes a decision based on baseball reasons and not just, oh, well, Japan is closer to LA or California or whatever silly reason that is non-baseball related, right? I guess you could say pressure is baseball related, but that's also doing with location. Again, when you have Yamamoto and Ohtani, they're kind of the bigger names, in Japan over Sasaki, right? Everybody's looking to watch Yamamoto and Ohtani, not necessarily Sasaki. If he comes to the Mets, you do have Senga, who is not, the biggest name in Japan, but is known. Sasaki would be the guy in Japan that everybody's watching for the Mets. And the Yankees basically have nobody. They'll start talking about Matsui again. And that's basically it. So I don't really know what's his mindset. I don't think anybody knows except for his agent and his family, obviously. But I still believe that he knows where he's going. And I don't think it's going to be much longer after the January 15th that we're going to know where he goes. And again, this is the problem. This is the problem with what the Mets have done with the rotation, is because we're relying so much on this guy choosing us that if he doesn't, where are the Mets going? Are they done? And Sasaki's the last hope for a better rotation than what we see right now? Because, I said this in the chat prior to coming live. I can't be excited about this offseason. I don't care if they get Alonso, Bregman, both of them, one of them. I'm just not going to be excited or grade them any higher than a B, even if they get all those bats in the lineup, because I think you could have done more with the rotation in many other ways, even if it wasn't Sasaki. But I feel like they're relying on Sasaki, and if they don't get him, this is going to be the rotation we see. Maybe a lower level rotation guy that they might actually add, because as of right now, is there really 6 guys in this rotation? If you really think about it, like, you're going to have to throw McGill in there. You're going to have maybe Sproat be ready to go out of spring training, because it's either going to be Tyler McGill, or another, journeyman type of guy that we can't trust. And that's what I don't understand. You don't have enough guys in your rotation to fill the 6-man rotation that they actually start. You got a guy who's trying to be a starter in Clay Holmes. You got David Peterson, who we don't really know if it was the injury that really, stopped him from being the potential pitcher he was, or he could be when he first came up. Montage, we're hoping to fix him. And then we have Kodai Senga coming back from injury, and we're hoping Minaya pitches like the AC was last year. Other than that, like, what do we have? And that's the problem that I have relying on the Sasaki decision. And that's why I'm very pissed off, and people are like, calm down. But you can't, because I don't want to score 7 runs per game and give up 8 runs per game. Like, you're still losing ball games here. The whole idea is to win ball games. You can't have a juggernaut offense and have a piss poor or at least a slightly above average rotation and act like you're going to be competing with the Dodgers, the Braves, the Phillies, the Padres. It's going to be hard to do that. The National League is stacked. You got to compete against these guys all year because you're constantly playing these teams. And then when you get into the playoffs, it's going to be, the Mets couldn't have a harder road getting to the World Series last year. The Brewers were, we played every division winner in the NL to get to the World Series. We didn't get there because we didn't have enough pitching. And nobody can say to me that the pitching is better coming, as of right now with this rotation we have currently than last year. Because at least we had a guy in Jose Quintana who was there every fifth day giving you innings, right? I'm not sure about Montas. I don't know about David Peterson. Does anybody know that Peterson give us 175 innings like a Severino or even Montas for that matter?
Well, we didn't know Severino was giving us 180 plus before last season anyways either, though.
Yeah, but we didn't have expectations like we're having in this season during this.
I agree with that. That's 100% true.
Right?
I agree.
Nobody was really talking about how good somebody can be when we just needed innings from these guys and hope for the best. Once we started to make a run for the playoffs, we're like, oh, now we got to start talking about. But we were talking about it in August about everybody's innings and the problems that they were going to come up with. It eventually bit them in the ass in the playoffs, especially in the NLCS, and that's the issue here. Right, we're relying on Kodai Senga that hasn't pitched over 150 innings 2 years ago. So why do we expect him to do that then? Now we have to put more pressure on Minaya when we shouldn't have to. That's why it's stupid when somebody says, "Oh, I'm not going to give 7 or 8 years to a Corbin Burns or a Max Fried." Yeah, you do that for at least one guy. You can mess around with the rest of the rotation and not give, long-term contracts with everybody else. But you need one of those guys. You need one. And maybe Sasaki is that guy. Maybe the Mets really feel confident about their meeting and they're going with that and hoping for the best. But if Sasaki does not land with the New York Mets, I'm sorry. And there's trade opportunities out there. But again, until Stearns actually trades prospects, I have to see it to believe it, because I'm not confident going in this rotation. And what if Clay Holmes isn't looking good in spring training as a starter and you go in with this rotation? Now you have to throw McGill in there because Holmes isn't good enough. So now you even hurt your rotation even more because you're hoping for the best with Clay Holmes. Can he be Seth Lugo? Sure. Can he be Michael King? Sure. But it's probably more likely that he won't be than he is.
I think that, yeah, there's a lot of what ifs in this rotation, and it is infuriating to think about if the Mets are relying on this scenario to be Sasaki or bust, which I think before we ended, the calendar year of 2024 and the last show that I did with you on this Mets hot stove was that, it was kind of looking like and kind of feeling like for me when I've been so adamant all off season long, going back to the middle parts of November, the Mets are going to solidify this rotation. They're not going to just bring back, they're not just going to bring on Holmes, Montas, and bring back Minaya and call it a day. And month and a half goes by, we hear nothing. We do nothing on multiple fronts. And again, I'm kind of now starting to transition into that idea that it could be Sasaki or bust. And, I'm not confident as well, regardless of, the Mets' ability to transform a seemingly hopeless rotation, especially after the Kodai Senga injury last season, into a respectable rotation, a rotation that was not enough, but like good enough to get to where they got to and kind of carry the offense a little bit. That should not be the strategy in going into 2025, especially after signing Juan Soto. But if it is, we have to prepare for that, Rob. And not just us, but fans in this chat, we have to prepare for it. Because, again, Luis Castillo, we've been talking and nothing's materialized, whether it's the Mets, Red Sox, whoever else, nothing's materialized on that front. Corbin Burns goes back to, where he lives in Arizona, and he takes that deal. The Mets weren't in on him. And so it's just kind of getting to that point where it does feel like Sasaki or bust. And I agree. I'm not confident as well. But at some point, we've said all along that this rotation right now is what ifs. And we're starting to get into that mode of the offseason where there's still moves to be had, but we also have to transition into projections and predictions of what's going to happen with the rotation, the lineup, etc. And I don't know if you saw this, but not that it matters, but some of these algorithms out there are predicting Clay Holmes to be an every fifth or sixth day starter with these projections, 175 innings pitched to however successful he's going to be. I think the Mets actually might be thinking that he can go the whole season as a starter. I know that's a huge risk, a huge gamble, but I think the Mets actually think that.
Here's the problem with that, right? How can anybody project that or believe that when he hasn't done that since he was a Pirate?
I agree.
When he first came up. That's I don't care what analytical stats you have. This guy hasn't pitched more than 75, 80 innings over the last 4 years. What did he did that 6 years ago with the Pirates? And he wasn't even good. I'm not saying that he can't do it, but you brought up a great point with the starting rotation, right? Nobody expected the starting rotation to be what it end up being, right? It was better than expected, but it also wasn't enough. It was good. It kept us afloat in April and May when the bats were terrible, right? And then they were better, pretty good during the rest of the season. But when it came down to it, it wasn't enough. You can't go with the same mentality or way of going about it with the rotation when it didn't work last year. So that means you're expecting Manaea to take another step, Cy Young step, and then who's going to be that next guy? Who's going to be that Severino? Is Kodai Senga going to be ready to go? We don't even know if he can pitch 150 innings, let alone 10 innings this year. We're leaving way too much hope with this rotation. But again, even if they are better than expected, we're going to still talk about the deadline where we're going to need a starter. And we know how it goes with it, especially with more teams involved and closer to a playoff spot than ever. The way with the new playoff bracket and the way that the teams get in, more teams get in, more teams are less likely not to trade guys because they think they're still in it, which makes it harder to get a big arm pitcher at the deadline, which means more competition. And there's no guarantee you're going to get that. And I hate when people say, "Oh, this isn't a bat where you can get." There's so many bats that are available at the deadline. Or even bullpen arms for that matter. Starting pitching is the hardest thing to get at the deadline when it's so easily available in the offseason. There should be no conversation. I'd rather worry about needing a bat or a bullpen arm at the deadline, which are the easier things to get than a starting pitcher that actually is good. It seems backwards to me. And again, I don't believe David Stearns is trading prospects until he does it. And I keep on going back to this all the time. Go through Mets history. I don't care who's the GM. Every time they have a season where they go on runs, the following season, they don't do enough in the offseason or the deadline to make their team better. And it bites them in the ass every single time. And we keep on talking about in the offseason, what if they did this? What if they did that? And then we act like, oh, well, look at the great season they had. Yeah, but we didn't win. At some point, it's got to be, how do we get to winning? How do we get to win the World Series? It's not a cute game anymore, because here's the point. Here's the problem that we're going to have. We got to game 6 of the NLCS. If we don't get to the NLCS again, it's a failure, guys. Let's make no mistake about it. You signed Juan Soto to a $1 billion deal, basically. You're gonna spend basically $1 billion this offseason, even just adding a couple more guys to this roster. And if you don't get to where you were last year, it's a failure. That's the problem. It is NLCS or better. Anything less than that is a failure. And I just don't understand why half-assing a rotation is not more of a problem for more people. there's Met fans that acting like, oh great, here's the problem. This is what's I feel like it's going to happen. The New York Mets are going to sign Pete Alonso. They're not going to get Sasaki. They're going to get a couple of bullpen arms. And because they got Alonso, Met fans are going to be kissing Stearns' ass because they brought back Alonso, and everybody's going to have, the rose-colored glasses on because Alonso's back. And they're not going to realize the problems until the season starts, and you can't do anything about it until the deadline, which is possibly not a great chance of getting that starting pitcher at the trade deadline because it's hard to get. And I think that's the issue that they're going to fall into. And I'm sick and tired of going into the season with question marks because there's no need. This offseason, there was no need. Our own organization said it last year. Chris, we were live talking about it over and over again. What did they say? 2025, the years they were going for it. This is not going for it, in my opinion.
I mean, it's hard to refute what you're saying. I mean, like, I look at this, the free agent, at least the free agent market, because trades, I mean, we know who's available. We know who could be available in terms of the starting pitching front, and it's a wild card, right? If Stearns is actually going to make that move, depending on what you have to give up. A lot of people are talking about developing your own homegrown pitching to not have this problem in the future. Again, that's all fine and dandy. They're trying to do that, right? It starts with Christian Scott, who's coming back next year, not this year, but next year. It starts with Brandon Sproat, who we can also potentially see at some point in the 2025 season to make an impact lower in the rotation. But that's going to take more years to develop. It doesn't just happen over the course of a year or two of rebuilding your farm system. That's going to take some time. So yeah, man, we said it. It's a risk. Do I think and do I believe that this year's rotation could mimic what last year's rotation did, even with the new personnel? Yes, I think that right now with the personnel in this rotation could be the ceiling of mimicking what the 2024 rotation did, replacing Sevi in that rotation, replacing Jose Quintana, who's also still available, by the way, with the new personnel. But is that ceiling of what they can be enough? The answer is no. The answer is no, and we saw why last season, because they ran out of gas and they ran out of steam towards the tail end as they were approaching that league championship series. So again, I have high hopes for this rotation, but again, high hopes aren't enough. We need solidified options, right? We want to go into the season with solidified options, and things change, right? Projections change, statistics all the time. So I'm not going to write off this rotation because they aren't star-studded. I would just be a little bit disappointed in terms of the effort level from the front office, putting the best to get rotation together on paper as possible. But again, as we all know, I'm pretty sure we both said this, and last year was a very big indication of that. Stuff that gets put together on paper doesn't necessarily translate on the field. And that goes both ways too. It's vice versa. So I'm kind of hesitant on January 3rd to just look at this rotation on paper and just say, they suck. What are we doing here? But on the flip side of things, I can also, have that even keel, demeanor and say, Rob, you are correct as well in your sentiment in terms of the effort level. With the names that were available, there could have been more done. Again, we're saying could have with the names that are off the table, but you talk about a couple of names that would be interested free agent wise still out there, not really game changers. In Flaherty, in my opinion, in Flaherty and Pivetta, the game changers are via the trade market. Do we think they're actually going to trade for a game changer at this point? I don't know. We'll see here soon.
The options are limited now. You don't have a fallback plan on Burns anymore. Now it's trade options. And I want to see the Met fans' reaction when Sasaki doesn't pick the New York Mets. Because then it's gonna sit in their heads now. It's gonna start to set in. Oh no, we don't have that many options left. And unless we trade for a starting pitcher, this is what we're going to in spring training. And I don't care what anybody says. Manaea can be great. There is no other confidence there in that rotation to tell me that, this person is nearly a guarantee or almost a guarantee to give you 160, 170 innings, because none of these guys did it last year. Like and if they did, they finally did it for the first time, and we just assume they're gonna do it again. Like, I mean, haven't we watched baseball enough where guys who never pitched that many innings in their career come back the following year and struggle to even stay healthy, let alone pitch that many innings? It's been a constant battle with that, and we should know that. And I'm not saying that these guys can't do it, but again, it just you're leaving too much room for failure. And you're putting too much pressure on the offense to do the job every single day. And it usually doesn't work out. Now in the playoffs, you might be able to, beat your way through a playoff like the Dodgers did this year and like the Rangers did 2 years ago. But you got to get to the playoffs. And with two teams in your division that are as good, if not better than you also got to make the playoffs. Arizona got a hell of a pitching staff. There's a couple of teams in the NL West that are going to be battling for wild card spots because they're not going to be better than the Dodgers. That's the team the Mets have to face. So there's two teams in the NL West. There's the Phillies and the Braves that the Mets have to tell with. So that's already 5 teams right there that you have to fight with. And you're not even talking about who can be good in the NL Central that doesn't win that division. Like, there's a lot of things here where the Mets can be fighting for a third wild card again. And who wants to do that? Now, it's not the end of the world, but why go through another? Just imagine if the Mets would have figured out a way to win, be as good in April and May. They could have had a chance for a division. Maybe they didn't have to play a wild card around. Maybe it would have kept a little bit more bullets in the arm of Minaya and Severino and Quintana and others. And maybe we would have had a chance of going to the World Series. Little things like that matter. But because we had to fight our way from 11 games under to the third wild card on the last day of the season, or the last games of the season, we used a lot of energy for that. Why? I'm not saying that you get burned and all of a sudden, great, we're not going to be the third wild card team. We still could be, but there's too many unnecessary obstacles that we have to go through hoping for the best. And it's a silly concept, especially when you sign Juan Soto to that record-breaking deal. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Really doesn't.
I have a question for you. I think the Mets are going to make the playoffs regardless. I think they're going to make the playoffs regardless. Okay. I don't like the NL stacked. The NL is stacked. I think they're going to the playoffs regardless. I actually had that question for you. So let's just say, because again, it's January 3rd. There's a lot of offseason left. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that at all. Let's say that the Mets from here on out have an underwhelming rest of the offseason for what the standards were set as soon as Juan Soto made his decision to go to the Mets, right? Let's say they get Alonso, they re-sign Alonso, and they re-sign Winker, and they don't do anything else in the rotation. Do you think that's a playoff team or not? Honest answer.
I think they're going to scrape to the playoffs. I think it's going to be like last year. It's going to take the final week of the season to make the playoffs. And that shouldn't be the case when our owner and our GM said 2025 was the year. They specifically said that last offseason. Like, I don't want to scrape by. I want to be, if not the first wild card team, I want to be a division winner. Because being the second and third wild card team means you weren't good enough. And you just scraping by. Like, I don't see the point in that. But I guess I'm going to say yes, because I think the Phillies, I don't care if they got Luzardo or not. Every year they've been getting worse and worse year by year ever since the World Series appearance. And I already said it. I think they're going to miss the playoffs this year. Right? I think, as soon as things go wrong there and they don't get off to a good start, things can spiral out of control with that team, because they've been, again, World Series, NLCS, NLDS last year. The only things left is either a wild card team or out of the playoffs. And I think they're going to fight for one of those spots, either a wild card spot or out of the playoffs as a whole. So I'm going to say yes, but they're going to scrape by and barely make it. And what is that? 89 wins? We need 89 wins to win, when prior seasons it was 84, 83, 84, 85. So 89 wins isn't a bad season, but you have to win 90 games to basically make the third wild card team, the wild card playoff to get to the playoffs. That's a little crazy to me. You have to win 95 games to probably be safe. Like, that's a big order. That's 6 more wins than last year. Is Juan Soto and Alonso enough? with basically a rotation with Minaya, even if you don't see him as a question mark, say he's projected to do what similar to what he did last year, if not better. I don't know. You could say the rotation is better, so I just don't know. I really don't know.
That was my follow-up question to you. With everything remaining consistent, Sevy gone, Quintana gone, and whoever else, adding in Clay Holmes, Frankie Montas, bringing back year 2 Sean Manaea in a Mets uniform, do you and a healthy Kodai Senga presumably? Let's just make that assumption for the sake of this argument, even though I know that you don't buy into Kodai Senga being completely healthy as of right now until we hear more. Do you think that this rotation is better than what we saw going into last season? Not what they showed us they were, but what we thought going into the season.
No, because at least the rotation last year actually had starters that actually started over the last couple of seasons. Again, when you're fifth starter at the moment, because the Mets don't have 6 starters right now. Like you could say Griffin Cannon, you could give me Tyler McGill. I'm sorry, that doesn't excite me at all. Clay Holmes is the back end of the rotation who hasn't pitched over 100 innings in 5-6 years. I can't say it's better. I cannot, because at least Luis Severino, Jose Quintana, Kodai Senga at the time before he got hurt, Manaea, these guys were all starters. So I can see them having the potential to pitch better because they've done it before in their careers. We don't know what Clay Holmes is as a starter. I mean, if you want to look back all the years back to Pittsburgh, he sucked. That's why he became a reliever. Montas 2 years ago, before he got traded to the Yankees, had a 3.2 ERA. But that was 2 years ago. I'm not going to, go back 2 years ago and say that's what he's going to be for us when he had over a 4 ERA the last 2 seasons with the Yankees, Reds, and Brewers. And David Peterson, as much as I liked what he did last year, I couldn't believe that David Peterson had a 2.9 ERA last year in 28 starts. That was outstanding. But can he do that? I mean, he has the stuff. But again, he hasn't thrown that many innings in his career either. So we don't know how he's going to bounce back with that. We went deep into the playoffs. That takes a toll on these arms. And again, Kodai Senga is a big question mark. I'm going to say no. I know that's a long story short, but I'm going to say no.
I actually do believe in David Peterson. I think he will regress a little bit. I don't think he's going to pitch to the tune of a 2.91 ERA again. I think he'll regress a little bit, but I do believe in him. It's tough. It's really tough because, I mean, you can look at it from both sides of the fence again, but, when I hear everything that you're saying, I can't push back on it too much, to be honest with you, because the Mets, up until this point in the offseason, have had chances to make the team better definitively. They passed up on some opportunities and some routes that I might have explored if I was the GM, but that's why I don't get paid the big bucks, and we'll see what they do from here on out. So how about we talk about Alex Bregman and transitions?
Sure. I mean, 40-something minutes on pitching. That's interesting. We don't talk about much like that. But yeah, Bregman, I still don't think the Red Sox are going to get him. I know there's been talk back and forth about this across all of social media. I don't see the Red Sox doing it. I know they said they wanted to move Devers out of third base. That's been the talk on sports talk radio in Boston as I checked it out the last 2 days, because I always like to listen to other areas where it kind of relates to the Mets because we're looking for the same player. But Bregman has always been on the radar for the Mets from basically the beginning of the offseason. It's been constant. And the Tigers, I mean, Rosendahl said it, Sherman said it, Heyman said it. Multiple guys said it, that they don't believe the Tigers are willing to spend that money. Even though they're all in on Bregman, they're trying to get him at a discount. And I think the Mets are willing to go 6 years, 5-6 years for Bregman for a decent amount of money. Yeah, it might be an overpay, but when you got basically Alonso in your back pocket, unless somebody blows Alonso out of the water, you can be looking at a Bregman, Alonso, Soto offseason for your lineup, and that's really damn good. I think Bregman's going to be a Met. I think there's been way too much smoke over the last 2 months about Bregman with the Mets, and I think Stearns is just waiting in the wings with this, where I think the Tigers are eventually going to fall out of it because he wants more money and more years. And I don't think the Red Sox are as serious, and I think we both agree on that we don't think the Red Sox are as serious as they were. I thought they were much more serious about it prior to the Crochet trade, even though pitching and and obviously offense is much different, but I don't think they're going to do that. I just feel like the Mets are going to be the ones that are going to win that battle with the Tigers and the Red Sox when it comes to Bregman, because I honestly think it's down to two. If Bregman wants to go to the Tigers for a little less money and a little less years, or similar years but less money, he'll go to the Tigers. But why hasn't he signed there yet? Because he knows the Mets are waiting in the wings there. He could probably get the best deal from the Mets, and that's what I think he's probably holding up on. I think there is an offer on the table for Alex Bregman from the Mets, and I think he did. I wouldn't say Bregman doesn't want to come to the Mets. Maybe he does want to go to the Tigers just because it is simple. Put him at third base, and there you go. The Mets got to make a couple of moves. They got to move Vientos to DH or possibly first base, right? There's a couple of things there, but we know Bregman's going to be the third baseman. I do think the Mets have an offer on the table for Bregman. And again, the Mets don't leak nothing, so we have no idea. It's going to be probably a 2 a.m. signing, like always, because David Stearns is sleeping right now until midnight, and then he starts to cook. So I think Bregman's going to be a New York Met. It hasn't been the same amount of smoke with Anthony Santander, even though there's been reports that the Mets are still eyeing Santander and like lingering just to see if the Blue Jays kind of screw that one up again with another player. I do think Bregman's going to be a Met, Chris.
Yeah, I have a hard time involving the Blue Jays in any conversations for any of these top guys, right? I really do. I think also I agree with you that the Bregman sweepstakes are a little bit of a two-team race right now, unless by some miracle, some mystery team comes in and swoops him up. The obvious hurdle for the Tigers is the money. I mentioned that Bregman, I can see him getting up to $30 million per year. He's probably going to want, with what we've heard, him wanting in the overall contract value being north of $150 million. We can probably predict 160 to 180 for Alex Bregman. There's no way it gets up to $200 million. I think that is a big issue for the Detroit Tigers, and they're going to have to free up some allocated money on their 2025 payroll right now. 30 more million dollars, which is Alex Bregman for the Detroit Tigers, puts them back up there with the highest payroll that they've had in recent memory. I think tied with either 2021 or 2022 for that organization. So there is something to be said for maybe a deal isn't done between Bregman and the Tigers, is because the Tigers are potentially looking at a lateral move to free up that allocation in their payroll and take on an Alex Bregman and actually go up to the number that he wants. That's a match made in heaven. I have no doubt in my mind that, their need for a solidified third baseman, and also paired with the fact that, AJ Hinch is their manager and has a lot of familiarity with Alex Bregman already, makes that a perfect destination. But the Mets also need a bat. We talk about, the or, not an and, but an or. If there's an or situation with the New York Mets and it is another pitcher or two bats, right? In addition to Alonso or Bregman, this is perfect to start off and pair up with in the middle of your lineup to go along with Juan Soto. We've been talking about Bregman and Alonso. Santander's also entered the fold. I could see a perfect situation with Santander and Bregman, or Alonso and Bregman. But this is a lot of, I guess, hope for us right now. There's nothing really concrete that they're actually eyeing two bats. We just have to assume that they are, because if they miss out on Sasaki and if they don't do anything else in the rotation, there's going to have to be the utmost firepower in this lineup to try to compete with a team like the Dodgers, who have a stacked 1 through 5, maybe even a 1 through 6. And to get on their level, you need to add two of these premier bats. So, Rob, I wish I had this crystal ball to just look into what's going to happen in the future, the near-term future. But again, I'm not saying that January 3rd is the end all be all. There's plenty of offseason left. As we saw, JD Martinez, and he's signed, it was a big signing for the New York Mets and getting that bat that they needed last offseason at the point that they did. But I'm not going to lie, time is ticking and it's starting to tick here as this offseason kind of progresses. So I don't know, man. I think Bregman is a perfect fit. I know that a lot of Mets fans have a lot of strong feelings about moving Vientos off of third base. I am not, and I've been on record about not being one of those Mets fans because, again, Vientos, his primary asset that he brings to this team is his bat. And he can do that whether he's playing third, whether he's playing first, or whether he's a straight up DH. And I don't think it's going to hinder that. And I don't think that his defense, even though he played a serviceable third base last year, if you're telling me that you can solidify your left side of the infield with 2 gold glovers, or should be gold glovers, right? It should be gold glovers in Francisco Lindor and Alex Bregman. Yeah, 100% I'm going to do that. And I'm not going to think twice because I'm worried about stunting the growth of Mark Vientos with the glove. He's still going to be there with the bat. And if we're trying to say, how can we take the best route possible to try to compete with the Dodgers, who are having another strong offseason, right? After the signing of Juan Soto. If you're not going to do it with the rotation and what we just spent the first 45 minutes of this live stream trying to sort of reason with this Mets front office and doing, then the next best route is by just putting together a video game type of lineup that the Dodgers also have in year 1 through 5. And that's by adding 2 big bats. And one of them, situationally and positionally, should and could be Alex Bregman. And there's something to be said for what he's actually looking for, anywhere between 4 to 6 years. He's 31 years old. Actually, he's 30 years old, going on 31 years old. Yeah. He's probably going to want the 6 years. And I know a lot of Mets fans are in this mode of, let's not give these long-term deals out. Let's just give these short-term deals out and also hope to build a team like the Dodgers. That's just simply not going to happen. So the same people that I am seeing saying, I don't want to go 6 years for Bregman are probably the same people that are saying they didn't want to go 6 or 7 years for a Corbin Burns. And it just doesn't make sense to me because at that point, you're limiting your options and you're limiting the playing field here. So what are we really doing?
Correct. Exactly. And again, the Bregman situation, and Bregman does suit the David Stearns mantra of, run prevention. And I know people don't want to care about defense until they make a ton of errors and then they worry about defense until it happens. But again, he prioritizes defense and run prevention. If you can lock down, and again, Vientos was excellent last year, but Bregman's better at third base. It's just no doubt about it. And again, Vientos is here because of his bat. That was the reason why he got the opportunity at third. And again, we all forget he was not playing third base in the minors until Brett Beatty came to the majors. He was basically first base DH for the longevity until Beatty became the third baseman in the big leagues for a limited amount of time. So again, the Mets, everybody talks about, you can move Jet Williams to center field, you can move Mauricio to third base, put Acuna to second base. Not their natural positions. You don't care about moving those guys around, but yet you don't want to move Vientos around when the best quality he has is his bat. I don't care if he DHs. Again, you're trying to make your team better. This is not time to make somebody feel good about themselves and hurt their feelings or anything like that. We're trying to make the team better, and Vientos understands that. If you bring in Bregman, you think Vientos is going to say, I'm better than Bregman? No, you're not. Not yet. You might be, but not yet, right? You're better in your team. And if anybody is not going to go on board with better in the team, then you're going to be gone. We saw that last year, right? If you didn't get on board with the culture, with the way the Mets were doing things, you were gone. So I'm not saying they're going to get rid of Vientos, but I'm just saying Vientos isn't stupid. He's a smart guy. He grew up a Mets fan. He understands what Stearns is trying to do here. So, by the way, Stearns gave him the opportunity, which nobody else did. So he's going to trust Stearns. And I think Bregman just makes more sense. And the reason why, and this is not out of thin air that me and Chris are talking about the 2 bats scenario because of the whole 2-year offer to Teoscar Hernandez, right? We all thought, all right, it's either going to be Alonso or Bregman or Santander because it wasn't making a ton of sense to go after two of those guys. But once they went after Teoscar Hernandez, and we know the Mets are in on Pete Alonso, they're like, okay, they're trying to get two bats here. Like, that seems to be the focus. And we know Teoscar Hernandez was going to be the lower end years-wise compared to Santander and Bregman, but they were looking to get another bat other than with Alonso as well. So that's why we're starting to think that it's a real possibility that another bat's coming with Alonso. And I still think Alonso's going to be here at the end of the day. I think Alonso is going to be crawling back to the contract that they offered. And they're still going to get another bat. That's where it's coming from. We're just not throwing it out there just to to have kicks and giggles here. That's why we believe it, because we didn't talk about two bats much until the Teoscar Hernandez news popped out with the Mets offered him 2 years. That's when we started to really hit the nail on the head there with that when it came to that. But I wanted to talk about this comment here, the super chat. And Henrik, I want to thank you. Time to tilt our cap to Alonso and look for a fresher, younger talent. Alonso isn't going to age well. Go after Vlad next year. Get Bregman. If Alonso stays, great, but it's time to look ahead. I'm not going to necessarily. Chris, let me let you answer that first. I'm sorry, because I talked a lot already.
No, I was just gonna say, it's just like the tier of bats that we were talking about. Like we probably we're talking about two bats, but one of them being Winker, who's not on Teoscar Hernandez's level, right? So like there's obviously like a caveats to this. So it's a great comment by Henrik. Again, if you say hope is not a strategy, and if you're hoping for Vlad Guerrero, that's a lot of hope, right? To be had. So again, you can do that and you can get a stopgap first baseman unless the Jays are willing to trade Vlad in this offseason. Although I still stand by my prior statements on the previous Mets Hot Stove episodes and that I'm not quite convinced the Jays are actually going to do it this offseason. If everything that we're hearing and the buzz surrounding Vlad wanting $400+ million, and maybe he's just kind of playing hardball with the Jays because he actually wants to leave Toronto, and that's his end goal, is to just leave Toronto straight up, they might be forced with a situation where they don't want to go through with what the Mets just went through in a Pete Alonso 2.0 situation and having him have another down year and then selling low on him on the offseason, or potentially, foregoing that if they're a playoff contender and just losing him straight up for nothing, next offseason in free agency. So it's a good comment by Henrik here. Again, I just have a lot of questions on if the Jays are going to do it first and foremost, and if the Mets are still trying their hardest in negotiating with Pete Alonso, is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. actually on their radar, even if he becomes available? And at that point, we talk about immense trade packages, probably with what we've been, and I've already seen some trade packages from Mets fans in a hypothetical Vlad trade. And I'm here to tell you that most of what I've seen is a severe underpay, and the Mets fans are not accounting for, what the Jays asking price is going to be. So I appreciate Henrik, providing this insight and providing this comment. In an ideal scenario, if there's a way that you can officially move off of Alonso and still strengthen your lineup, you could talk about a Yandy Diaz at first base. But again, when you move off of Alonso and if Vlad Guerrero is not in the picture, there's really limited options, to be honest with you.
Yeah, exactly. I don't care about Vladimir Guerrero next year, Henrik. I like the comment, but I don't care about fresher or younger or Alonso's. Alonso's not young. He's 30 years old. All right. I'm not on board. Even though I kill Alonso for many other reasons, I'm not going to kill him because he's 30 years old. He's played 155 plus games every year. I'm not going to go crazy with that. I don't care about the aging process that he's going to break down at 34. Nobody knows that. I don't care what analytical stat you tell me. And when they use that, they don't want to use other things to break down a guy or talk negative about the guy. You know when I talk negative about a guy? I bring up stats. That's how I bring up negative comments when it comes to the player. I bring up the stats. I don't care about the aging. He's not old. I don't care. Look, again, it's still a 3 to 4 year window where we're trying to win here. And by the time Alonso's 34 years old and Lindor's 34 years old and Nimmo's 34 years old, you know what? We're going to be talking about replacing those guys anyway because they're getting old and probably have to take them off the positions they're at. So you got 3 to 4 year window here to win with those guys in their prime years. Alonso's in his prime, right? I'm not going to go crazy with that. Again, I think the Mets could move off Alonso and still, you can get Bregman and get a stopgap first baseman and still have a damn good offense because Bregman with his 25 home runs, Soto with his 25 to 30 home runs, that's 55 home runs. There's the offense that Alonso provides for one person, but you stretch out your offense, right? Not saying that I would do that. I still would rather have Bregman and Alonso, but again, there's ways to go about it, but I still think Alonso's going to crawl back to the Mets at any point. He's going to make the final call to the Mets. And I would be shocked if the Angels offer him 4 years, 120, and he calls back the Mets and saying, look, this is what the offer is from the Angels. If you match it, I'm a Met. I think the Mets would match it, to be quite honest with you. Because 4 years, I think they would be fine with that. Regardless of the number, money-wise, I don't think they want to go 5+ years. But if they can match a 4-year deal, I think they would do that. But when you don't have to offer a 4-year deal, then you're going to not do it until you have to. And I think that's where the Mets are right now. They know they got Alonso over a Bauer right now. And
because there's no other offers, quite simply, out there for Alonso.
Correct. That's the issue. Like, the Mets are playing is so perfect. Now, I don't think they're playing it perfect with other aspects of the offseason, but with Alonso, they're doing it perfectly. They know there isn't a large offer out there because if there was, Alonso would have took a 6-year deal by now. Nobody's
He'd be gone in an instant.
Agree. And I talked about this. The first team to offer him that long-term deal, that 5-6-year deal, he's gone. But it ain't happening. Right? All the teams that had first baseman openings are basically non-existent at this point. The Angels are there because Artie Moreno likes to spend stupid money, and that's what you worry about. That is what you worry about. You can't have, and again, I'm not saying that the Mets should do this, but Artie Moreno is a guy that doesn't mind spending and going a crazy amount of years, like a guy like Albert Pujols. I'm not saying Pete Alonso is that, but he went above and beyond where the Cardinals didn't even think that was smart, right? If Artie Moreno's saying, screw it, I'm going to give you 7 years, the Mets are not going to do that, guys. I'm sorry. As much as I probably want Pete Alonso here, I'm not going 7 years with Pete Alonso. I'm just not doing it. As much as I would want Pete Alonso back, I'm probably not doing that for more than 4 years. And that's the issue. And that's where the Mets, the only thing that Stern has done right this year in this offseason, in my opinion, is the way he approached the Pete Alonso situation, because Boris screwed up the market for Pete Alonso because he thought there was going to be the Yankees or the Red Sox or somebody else that needed the first baseman that was willing to spend money. The Cubs, who wanted Pete Alonso for 4 years now. And they completely misjudged the market. And the 3 years, and don't think this isn't strategic. The 3 years, $90 million is, Pete, we're going to give you $10 million more than the qualifying offer because your career Met, you did great things with the Mets. So we're going to give you $30 million a year, which no team will do. But we're only going to give you 3 years because we know there ain't more than a 3-year deal out there. Because I guarantee you, other teams probably have 3-year deals for Alonso, but they're nowhere near the $30 million mark. So they're Boris and Alonso are hoping to get a team that says 5 years. Because I think the Mets would go for 120. Because I don't, it's not that much of a jump, right? The 4 years is where they probably stop. But if the Angels go 5 or 6 years, that's where the Mets might go, ooh, I don't know about that. And maybe they will turn to Vlad Guerrero. Who knows? But I'm not going to worry about Vlad Guerrero until it's actually known that he is not taking an offer and the Jays are not going to go $400 million where he wants 400 plus. And they're about $40 to $50 million under that from the last offer they try to get him with. I don't know, man. I see it as Alonso's going to be back and they're just going to swoop in for Bregman or Anthony Santander. And they're going to get one of them along with Alonso.
putting a very high percentage on the Mets re-signing Pete Alonso as well. I don't know, man, because if Vlad doesn't really want to be in Toronto, like I just said, they're forced to tear that experimental team down. Like there's nothing really left for them to do with that
Yeah.
team in Toronto. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I just don't think that resolution for Vlad Guerrero Jr. is going to come before Pete Alonso signs his next contract with whoever it is. I just don't think it's going to happen beforehand.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think the Mets, I don't want it to drag out into spring training because all that does is hurt the Mets and it hurts Pete, right? If he's not in spring training, he's not working out, he's not, building that camaraderie with the team and all that. And, obviously getting on the field is the most important thing. We've seen what it done to players. Look at JD Martinez, look at Jordan Montgomery. When they miss some spring training, it ends up ultimately hurting you during the season. And you can't have, another season like last year with Pete Alonso where he batted 212. Yeah, he hit 37 home runs, but you can't have him be unproductive run producing wise as he did last year and miss out on that. And I think Alonso can be better, to be quite honest with you. I think he can get that average back up to 250 and hit 40 home runs with no problem with 100 plus RBIs. But missing a little bit of spring training would be an issue. And I don't think the Mets or Pete Alonso want that. Do that with another team. If you want to hold out, I think the Mets, I'm going to say this blatantly right now. If Pete Alonso is not signed by the end of January, Pete Alonso is not going to be a New York Met because the Mets aren't going to play this game. They need to have I don't want to be 2 weeks before pitchers and catchers, and we still don't know where Pete Alonso is going because that means Bregman and Santander is probably going to be off the board. And you hope one of them is going to be a New York Met by that time. And, it's not the end of the world if Pete Alonso is not on the team. But we all know that Pete Alonso is probably going to crawl back to the New York Mets.
I agree with you.
All right. So, Chris, you've been talking about Jerks and Profar for about a couple of hot stoves now. And we're going to link it with the bullpen targets. We're going to do this together here. But with Jerks and Profar, right, this is a Teoscar Hernandez type of move, right? It's another bat. If you don't get Bregman or you don't get Santander, if you want to put Profar, who's a utility guy, play multiple. He's a Kiki Hernandez type, right? He can play all over the place. He's got a good bat. I think he hit 25 home runs last year again.
Like 22, 23, somewhere
So
just under
he's
25.
another 20 home run guy where you can play him in the outfield. He can play some infield. He can play everywhere. He's a Swiss Army knife, basically. But he provides some power and a good bat, and he's a good guy to have in your team. I do wonder if the Mets are looking at Profar right now, if they don't land Bregman or Santander, to link up with the rest of the lineup with Alonso. What do you think about the Profar situation?
Yeah, the Profar situation, again, as regardless of whether it's a good fit, again, he's a great player. Inconsistencies over the past couple of seasons. I mean, he's a great Padre, and when he went to the Rockies, he wasn't so great. I think he's going to be looking for a multi-year deal. I think he's going to be looking for like a Teoscar Hernandez 2.0 deal. I'm not saying he's on the same level as Teoscar Hernandez at all, but again, supply and demand, and coupled with the fact that he was a 280 hitter along with 20 plus home runs, that plays on any team, to be honest with you. And I have serious doubts in my mind that the Padres are going to prioritize re-signing him, given all the news that we've heard out of the San Diego Padres organization in their payroll cuts, etc. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that's going on with the Padres from what I'm hearing and what we're looking at right now, to suggest that they're going to make a serious attempt at re-signing him. I've heard, the Royals are a name to be, looking out for in the Profar sweepstakes. I just don't know. Again, right? It just seems like the Mets and David Stearns are methodical about the types of players that they go after. I don't know if Profar fits that mold for one reason or another. If it were up to me, he would. Like, I think that he would be a perfect fit for the New York Mets. But they are methodical about the contracts that they are offering to these players. And I don't think Profar is on the same level as Teoscar Hernandez. So if you're offering 2 years for Teoscar Hernandez, and by the way, did you just hear and see the quote that Teoscar Hernandez stated? It wasn't really I guess, blatantly said that it was the New York Mets, but he basically said that he left $5 or $6 million on the table per season to go back with the Los Angeles Dodgers on the type of deal that he signed. So you could assume that it could be about the New York Mets because they were one of the teams that had offers in on him, but it's a moot point now. It doesn't really matter. He's a Dodger. So I like Jurickson Profar. Again, he's versatile with the glove. Like you said, he's a switch hitter. I do believe he's a better left-handed hitter, but I have to take a look at the splits again. I don't know. Again, it would be now we're kind of teetering on the line of like, okay, is it Winker versus Profar? Because that's more of the sort of assessment that I make in terms of the overall skill set of Profar with the bat as far as the bat goes. So
Yeah.
he's no Teoscar Hernandez. He's more in line of a Winker. Maybe you pair Profar. If you're already thinking about Winker, maybe just spend the extra money to go get a Profar and then add him with whether it's Pete Alonso or Bregman. But uh, again, all these combinations that we're talking about, Rob, it's so difficult if we're actually talking about two bats because there's just multiple tiers to account for right now.
Yeah, I rather Kiki Hernandez over Profar. I like Kiki more. He's just a clutch player, and it seems like every team he goes to ends up in the World Series. So, he did it with the Red Sox, the Dodgers, so twice with the Dodgers actually. So I like Kiki Hernandez, but again, I wouldn't complain if it's either Profar or Kiki. Those guys. They're good bats. They're clutch. They would be interesting sign-ins, and again, I would be okay with that. It is interesting that you said about Teoscar Hernandez that, yeah, I think the Mets had more money on the table, but it's the years. Once again, the Mets are willing to give more money per year. It's just they don't want to give the years. Again, I'm not sure why it's such a thing with position players with David Stearns. Like, I thought it should be easier at the fact that they stay healthy more often than pitchers. I get not giving pitchers 7 or 8 years. Like, I'm pissed off about Burns, but I understand. I'm even pissed off about Max Fried, even though I didn't want Max Fried. I understand why they didn't do that because pitchers get hurt more often, and having those long-term deals usually don't work out at all. Position player wise, I don't see what's the difference between 2 or 3 years with Teoscar Hernandez or anybody else, even Pete Alonso for that matter. Look, if the Mets tomorrow sign Pete Alonso for a 6-year deal, I'm not going to go crazy about it because I don't care about the years. I really don't. I'd rather get him on a 3-year deal, but I'm not going to cry about it, in 2029 when it's the 4th year of the contract. I don't care about that. Just get the player you want. You target him, you get him, just like the Mets did with Juan Soto. They didn't care about the price. They didn't care about the years, right? I understand about the start and pitching, about the years, even bullpen for that matter. Position player-wise, I don't think it should matter, right? If you have to go 6 years with Pete Alonso, if you really want him back, I'm all on board with that. But to play games with position players and you end up losing them to competition in your league, that's a problem, right? Teoscar Hernandez goes back to the Dodgers, makes them better. You could have took Hernandez away from the Dodgers. I know that's not going to probably make or break the Dodgers season, but you know what? You take one less bat out of their lineup, and now he's your guy. Like, that's the other thing that we have to talk about, Chris, when it comes to bats, right? Alex Bregman, if he goes to the Tigers, great. It's the American League, right? If he goes to the Red Sox, great, the American League. What you don't want him to do is not come to the Mets and end up in the freaking National League like every other free agent seem like they're going. Right? I mean, can the National League get any freaking harder? Like, Jesus Christ. Like, I'm sick of that. Like, that's the other thing, right? I don't want like Santander. If he goes to Toronto, I don't care. Right? He'll stay in the AL East. Right? If they're not a Met, I want them out of the NL. If they're not a Met. So, again, Profar, Kiki Hernandez, I'll take either one of them. But again, we also got to bring up really quickly, if you get a Profar or you get a Kiki Hernandez, did that take out Winker? Does that take out Iglesias? Like, that is another conversation to have, Chris, in that regard. Because if you're going to give a 2-year deal to a Profar or Kiki Hernandez, it's probably going to knock out Iglesias or both Winker. That's the other thing we have to talk about. And I don't know if fans are going to be on board with that, even though Profar and Hernandez are better than both of those guys.
So it's starting to become a log jam, especially in the outfield for the New York Mets right now. And I'm going to talk about the infield on one of my videos that I actually have dropping tonight. I'm going to be talking about second base and the second base situation for the New York Mets in particular. You know what? And I know people don't want to talk about it, but we're going to talk about Jeff McNeil in that video. So that is releasing probably an hour, maybe hour and a half after we end this live stream tonight. So that will be posted. Stay tuned and subscribe. But the outfit is a completely different situation because you have a log jam. And by having that log jam, you limit what you can do by adding another outfielder or two. And you're not even taking into consideration at that point a guy like Drew Gilbert, who could be ready midway or towards the end of the season. Like what happens with him? What happens in this experiment, right? Where you're now playing Jet Williams in the outfield to try to see if he's a fit there for the long term. If you're signing these guys for a 2 or 3 year deal, whether it's Profar, Winker, I don't think he's going to, if Winker comes back to the Mets, I could see a 1 year deal, just a one and done situation. Would the Mets go and give him 2? Sure, he has to look out for his money at the end of the day, but I would think it would just take a 1 year deal there. But yeah, it's a logjam, and it all starts with Starling Marte. What is going to happen with Starling Marte? Do the Mets, if they are in a position where they are eyeing one of these outfielders, whether it's Kike Hernandez, whether it's Profar, or whoever else that's on the market, and they have to move Starling Marte and they can't find a trade suitor for Starling Marte, would they just eat the contract and just take on that dead money and just free up that roster spot? These are all questions that we have to start asking ourselves because, as stated at the beginning of this live, we're in this intermediate point where you just said, 40 days until pitchers and catchers report? Right. And not long after that is when spring training starts and you're starting to get ready for the 2025 season and opening day. We need to start talking about projections. We need to start talking about rotations, the lineup projection, and how the bench is allocated. And it's kind of a hard thing to do when you have guys that are creating log jams, in particular the outfield. And I guess you could say there's a logjam in the infield too with what happens with Luis Angel Acuna and whether he starts off in the minor leagues or whether he's on the major league roster, depending on if they want to bring back Jose Iglesias. If Jeff McNeil, because all signs are pointing toward Jeff McNeil starting, unfortunately, I will say unfortunately, because again, I'm not sure if he's going to go back to that 2022 version, especially with the shift and how that's banned now in the MLB. That's a big talking point. But right now, I think that they don't have anything anywhere to put Jeff McNeil. There's no package that teams are willing to take on those extra years that are with and attached to Jeff McNeil. There's log jams that when you talk about these tier B guys, right? Outside of Bregman and Santander, who are your tier A guy, and Alonso, tier A guys left in the market. When you talk about your Profars, your Kike Hernandezes, your Jesse Winkers, at that point, you can't make those moves unless you do something with a Starling Marte, et cetera. So I think a lot of fans just have to take that into consideration. I think that goes over a lot of people's heads as well.
Yeah, and you talked about log jams. There's a log jam in the outfield. There's a log jam with prospects in the infield. There's one spot available now at second base for 4 guys. That's another reason why you trade some of them. You pinpoint which guys you want to keep and which guys should be assets to get you a starting pitcher. That's the idea. Now, again, maybe they do this after the Sasaki decides if he's not a Met. Maybe they do pivot to that because they can't keep these guys in the minors forever, right? Somebody's going to play second base. If McNeil's going to be here, that means every one of the guys are going to either one of them's going to be on the bench most likely, and the other's going to be in the minors still. Where are these guys playing? There's not much room for these guys. Everybody can't be DHs. Everybody can't be second baseman. You can't put – this isn't softball. We can put 4 guys in the outfield. You can't do it. At some point, Stearns has to say, all right, I think Williams and I think Mauricio are the 2 guys that are going to excel and help us now and in the future. That means Acuna and, somebody else, another infield prospect are going to be available to trade. They have to start doing that. The same thing goes for Ryan Clifford. If you sign Alonso and the possibility of him having opt-outs and Vlad Guerrero, a free agent, Clifford might not even be an option for the Mets as a prospect anymore. He might be an asset as well. Gilbert, I think, is going to be the center fielder of the future. I don't think the Mets are going to mess. I think Gilbert and Sproat are the only 2 that are untouchable. Unless the deal that I'm looking for, and you got to go with Gilbert, you do it. But the fact of the matter is, there's a logjam everywhere. You got to start, using those assets and those extra guys that aren't going to be either on this team to help us in the near future because the spots are already filled. You got to use them as assets at some point. You can't keep on holding on to them because you're not trading them, you're not playing them. So what do? They waste the years in the minor leagues. It just does not make sense, right? Everybody wants to talk about the Dodgers. You want to talk about the Yankees. You want to talk about the Red Sox, on and on and on. The Rangers. At some point, they trade their prospects away. They pinpoint which ones that they can use for their team now and in the future, but they trade most of them as assets. That's how they get better. Yes, they spend money, but they trade their assets at some point to get better for their team now. It's just weird to me how they talk on both sides of their mouth when it comes to that, because they say they want to get better. They say that this guy is showing improvement. This guy's, so bring him up, right? If you don't believe in McNeil anymore, he shouldn't be on this team. Let somebody win in spring training, or pinpoint guys like Acuna and Mauricio to play second base. See which one wins the job, and that's it. Then that guy, oh well, too bad. It just doesn't, Beatty's out to dry. We let Beatty go from a sought after prospect that the Marlins wanted for Luzardo for 2 years, where other teams wanted Beatty in other deals. The Mets weren't willing to do that. Now he has no value, or at least very little, in 3 years. That's what you can't have happen to Acuna or Mauricio or Williams or Gilbert or Clifford. Because if that happens, you're going to have a Beatty situation on your hands. You can't keep on doing that.
I think you brought up, before we transition into the bullpen here, I think that's a perfect name and a perfect example of, having the ability to move on quickly and realizing a player, might not have what it takes to succeed here. And that's Brett Beatty, right? I mean, he can go elsewhere, maybe a lower pressure situation, and thrive. And Mets fans are going to be like, I told you so, right? I told you so. You shouldn't have gotten rid of him. That was never, and that was never going to happen here for Brett Beatty. The situation just isn't conducive for him succeeding here. And that's where, I'm sure the Mets are trying at this point, maybe to feel some offers for Beatty, but again, it goes back to the logjam, because what good is Brett Beatty? With Vientos, and everybody wants to. This is what I keep hearing. Vientos are third baseman. Vientos are third baseman, and the only way I'm moving off of Vientos at third baseman myself is if we get an Alex Bregman. I'm not putting Brett Beatty in there. What good is he at the minor league level for the New York Mets? We trying to build up value, and it is right. Teams around the league, he can rake at the AAA level, but he's nothing right now at the major league level. So, yeah, we'll see. I think the excess of talent leaves room for those trades to happen for a pitcher, like we talked about earlier in this segment. It's just about David Stern's willingness and other teams' willingness to give the proper value for what the Mets have in their assessments of these guys' skill levels. So, we're talking about Brett Beatty. We could talk about if Pete Alonso resigns, maybe your Ryan Cliffords, unless they have a DH. They want to shift Pete Alonso to the DH or Ryan Clifford to the DH. I mentioned this last offseason before we move on to the bullpen. I said this so many times with you, Rob, and everybody else that I talked Mets baseball with. The Mets, whether it's in 2024 or beyond, are going to have it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a good problem to have, but it's going to be a problem nonetheless, is that trying to understand which prospects are going to make the immediate contribution on a win now team versus who is going to get moved, because a lot of prospects are going to be ready in 2025. And there are some prospects that you can afford to wait until 2026 with, but you can't wait for everybody. Once there's 2027 and that comes around, it's too late. These guys are 25, 26 years old. It's time to move on to get the proper value. And that's the name of the game. And that's why Daniel Caps's credit here in the chat. That's why we don't get paid the big bucks, because that's a hard thing to do simultaneously.
Well, the Mets don't get rid of prospects anyway in the trade, so until that happens, we'll see. But let's talk about the bullpen. Again, Robertson has been a topic of conversation on social media that the Mets could bring him back. I'm okay with that. He's still been good at the late 30s. He's still actually been very good. He was good with the Rangers last year. Fine. I'm gonna be okay with that because he's not gonna be the main focus in this bullpen. Again, you have Reed Garrett, you got Buto, you got Nunez, you got Diaz. That's 4 guys already. You add Robinson in the mix, and let's say another lefty, let's say AJ Minter. There's your 6 guys right there. You're gonna need probably a long man in there as well. You got a solid bullpen. We're already starting with a pretty decent set of bullpen arms in Nunez, Buto, Garrett, and Diaz. You probably have to add 2 more, 1 lefty and another righty, maybe 2 righties. One's going to be a long man. But, if I say today, Chris, the Mets are going to bring in Robinson, I'm not going to – let's say a lefty, whatever lefty you want. I'm not saying Tanner Scott. I don't want anybody in the chat to go with Tanner Scott. They're not doing that. A solid lefty and a long man. Pick your poison, right? But it's Robinson and a solid lefty. Let's throw AJ Minter in there. Let's say it's Minter, Robinson, and a long man, along with Buto, Nunez, Garrett, and Diaz. I think you could be very okay with that, or at least I'll be okay with that bullpen.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. But at that point, and sorry if I was cutting out. Am I okay now, or am I still cutting out?
Oh, you sound good right now.
Okay, if I cut out again, I'm gonna have to probably leave and then come back in because it's hard times out here, man. I need a new computer. But I will say, yeah, the only problem is with the amount of talent. With the amount of talent that the Mets have right now, as it is in the bullpen, I'm talking about guys that could be high leverage guys: Daniel Nunez, Edwin Diaz, Reed Garrett. If you bring David, you're talking about David Robertson, right?
Yes.
If you bring David Robertson into the fold of that, obviously the easy solution is having Reed Garrett move down and Daniel Nunez maybe moving down to like a 6th or 7th inning type role. But what room does that leave the New York Mets to bring in a guy like AJ Minter? Because AJ Minter is a guy that you can play matchups with because he's a lefty, but he's far beyond just being a lefty specialist. He's a guy that you throw out there on a regular basis. So that becomes a situation where it's a little bit overcrowded for meaningful innings. I don't know if they would invest in both a Robertson and a Minter. I would love it because I would love that bullpen. You can just call it a day. Buto is your long man, and boom, there you go. But I don't know if they'll go that route. I'd be fine with re-signing Ryan Stanek, and I'd be fine with a reunion with David Robertson on a 1-year deal. I think both of those guys are 1-year deals, and I think that's what we'll see. Unless Minter is on their radar, I think we're just going to see a bunch of 1-year deals for the New York Mets in the bullpen. I do think that it's necessary to go and get a premier lefty like the Mets had, before Brooks Raley's injury, to get that premier lefty. No, it's not going to be Tanner Scott. The guy's going to get like a 4 or 5 year deal that the Mets are simply just not going to dish out that kind of money when they already have the amount of money allocated to Edwin Diaz. So we're talking about lower level Diaz here, 1 year or 2 years. But yeah, listen, the bullpen market hasn't shaped up yet, and there's so many names out there beyond just Tanner Scott that this is the one area where, yes, we can have questions for David Stearns about what his actual plan is for the rotation moving forward. But one thing that I'm definitely not going to question David Stearns on, especially with the plethora of names that are still out there for the taking in this free agent class in the bullpen, to pair up with what the Mets already have in the bullpen, is his plan for this reliever market. But I think with what you said, that plan, I'd have serious questions if it's Robertson and Minter. But if that's what it is, then listen, I'm ready to go because I like that bullpen line the way that it looks.
Yeah, and again, I've been killing Stearns with the way he's going about the pitching market, and how methodical he is when it comes to, contract situations with position players now. But one thing I don't worry about with Stearns is the bullpen. He's been really good figuring out bullpens. And we all forget that how many guys got hurt in the Mets bullpen last year. If Drew Smith and Brooks Raley would have been a part of this bullpen, that bullpen would have looked a hell of a lot. And even Shorty Foley, for that matter, who was also pitching well before he got hurt. Those guys were really important to that bullpen. You got to remember, the Mets made a big shift in their bullpen because those guys got hurt. Buto from rotation to bullpen. Nunez came up because of injury and became really damn good in the bullpen, right? And then it was Maton and Stanek. You had to get those guys because all these guys were hurt. We had to revamp our whole bullpen in the middle of the season because guys got hurt. If those guys didn't get hurt, look at the seasons they were having prior to getting hurt. The Mets could have been a hell of a lot better in the postseason and even during the season, and might have started that run a little earlier in May if their bullpen didn't get destroyed by injury. So I trust Stearns with the bullpen. Everywhere else, we can have a conversation about. But I think there's so many arms available that it's very hard. And again, bullpen's a year-by-year basis. Other than your closer, bullpen, your setup guy, your seventh inning guy, sixth inning guy, fifth inning guy, long man, it's a crapshoot. It really is. You just hope for the best when it comes to that. You get guys that you hope that have good seasons. And, as long as you got your closer that more often than not is damn good, you should be okay. It's rare that you're going to have every guy, shit the bed with the lack of words that I have right now, but shit the bed and not have a good job. So, look, the bullpen is probably mid after the Sasaki's done and possible trade pitchers that could be traded. That's when the bullpen market's going to pick up because that's where you allocate the rest of your budget for your bullpen. Until your roster is basically almost complete from lineup to rotation, that's when the bullpen, you start allocating the budget to your bullpen. All right, rapid fire time, Chris. Quick thing, is Alex Bregman going to be a Met, yes or no?
Yes, he is.
Yeah,
I think he is going to be a New York Met. Yep.
Because you've been against it for a while. You've been against thinking that it's not going to happen.
I definitely have been against Alex Bregman because back then we were talking about Heat or Bregman, right? We were talking about the or. And even if it is Peter Bregman and the Mets, choose to not go the route of Pete Alonso and they choose Alex Bregman for the reasons that we've talked about in this live stream and even beforehand, because I'm not naive to the fact that Alex Bregman has done it at the highest level and the most meaningful level in the playoffs and the World Series in his career, and he has that experience. Coupled with the fact that he is a stud defensively, it would be kind of just crazy to say, you don't want Alex Bregman if that's what it comes down to, if that's your only option. I'm not saying that Bregman's their only option, but I would like still for it to be a situation where it is Bregman and Alonso. I've been on record stating that if I had any combination of any guys on this market right now, I'd go Bregman and Alonso, and that would make me feel a lot better about potentially not adding another pitcher if the Mets miss out Sasaki and choose not to trade for anybody else. That is the way adding two bats would make me feel better about not adding another pitcher. So my question to you is, as my rapid fire question, is that which combination do you think would serve? Two-part question. First one is, which combination of two bats do you think is the most likely versus the one that you would like to see the most? Of any name that we talked about, Profar, Winker, Santander, Bregman, Alonso, maybe anybody else that maybe I'm not even mentioning right now. Who would you want?
I think Profar, Alonso is likely. I want Bregman, Alonso. The only reason why I say that is because Profar and Teoscar Hernandez, the 2-year deal kind of sits in that same category. That's why I think that's where Stearns would lean. But I still believe that Stearns is really on the radar. Bregman is really on the radar of Stearns, and with Alonso just sitting there for until he crawls back, I think it's likely Profar Alonso, but I think it's closer to likely that Bregman Alonso is starting to happen more. So I want Bregman and Alonso, but likely Profar and Alonso.
There you have it. I like that. I mean,
All
listen,
right.
I've
Yeah.
been pretty adamant about liking, the type of player that Profar is. So I think that he's very versatile. Do I think that it's likely? I don't know if I'll go that far, but
Yeah.
I would. I see where you're going with in the comparison of Hernandez and Profar. So yeah, that's a good
All right.
segment. I like that. Those are
Absolutely. That's an hour and a half of Mets making no moves, and we still talk about the Mets in an hour and a half because that's just what we do. Chris, new year, new logo, new channel. Just let everybody know what's going on with that.
Yeah, man. I rebranded this channel. I appreciate all the support. I'm going to be talking Mets on this channel and this channel only. There's going to be no other content on this channel but the New York Mets. So CP's True Mets Talk. I've had True Mets Talk for the longest time, but I incorporated True Knicks Talk. I incorporated a lot of Rangers content too. I put in my chat here in the live stream if you guys are interested in talking New York Knicks basketball. It's a great season. They got a huge game tonight. I will be talking Knicks basketball for the remainder of 2025 on a separate channel. I linked that. I'll link it on my channel as well. But I appreciate it. Hopefully you all like the content that's going on. Not many changes, not much changes to the content, but just a rebrand of it all. I made a new logo, and that's what we're rocking with here. Wanted to be a little bit more Mets focused. So I appreciate that. It was a great stream, and I appreciate all the support from everybody.
There you go, guys. So subscribe to both channels. Make sure you hit that like button before you go. If you're watching on X, head over to the channels, guys. Click that link and subscribe to the channel. Again, guys, if there's anything happening with the New York Mets signing-wise, we'll hopefully pop up. Most likely I'll be asleep or at work, so it'll be hard for me to do it. But we know Chris will pop up in the breaking news as well. But we will do our best to provide you with that breaking news. With that said, guys, episode 22 of Mets Hot Stove in the books. An hour and a half talk about what the Mets should do, but what will they do? We're still yet to find out in the new year. Have a great night, guys. Let's go Mets, and we'll see you next time on the Mets Hot Stove Show. Have a good night, guys.
Let's go Mets.
In the dead of night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine.